Let us then examine this point and say, God is or he is not. But to which side shall we incline? Reason can decide nothing here. There is an infinite chaos which separated us. A game is being played at the extremity of this infinite distance where heads or tails will turn up. What will you wager? According to reason, you can do neither the one thing nor the other. According to reason, you can defend neither of the propositions. Do not then reprove for error those who have made a choice, for you know nothing about it. No, but I blame them for having made not this choice but a choice, for again, both he who chooses heads and he who chooses tails are equally at fault. They are both in the wrong. The true course is not to wager at all. Yes, but you must wager. It is not optional. You are embarked. Which will you choose then? This one's a long and broken hallelujah, folks. A long and a broken, as they say, hallelujah. This ain't no glib picnic. This one's a halting, stammering type of convo about existential crisis and the all-important Penseés of Blaise Pascal, the 17th century physicist, mathematician, and supreme literary stylist who set out to construct an all-time defense of Christian belief. Whence comes the proposition known as Pascal's wager. It's very hard to wrestle with matters of belief clearly, nakedly, out in the open, to really hash it out with the heavens. Masks form out of thin air to protect our eyes. Masks form out of temperament to protect our hearts. We sugarcoat even our prayers, make them sing-songy, because the true voice of prayer would horrify us if we heard it too often. You are listening to Filthy Armenian Adventures. To discuss the famous wager of Blaise Pascal, a 17th century physicist and all-around genius who wrote a book trying to prove the existence of God, the Christian God specifically, and producing one of the all-time works of literature, not only in the history of France, but in the history of the world, even though it was unfinished. He died before he could complete the apology. And The fragments that he left behind are collected in a volume called the Penseés, which you've probably heard about, and which you should own. And one of the great stores of like aphoristic wisdom are contained in this book. This is like one of the all-time wise books, separate from the topic of whether or not you accept its arguments about God or whether you accept Pascal's famous wager. And the reason that I am doing this episode is because I want to see if maybe we can increase your faith level just a bit. That's the objective of this particular bull session adventure. It's to raise the faith meter, wherever it is. If it's 0, to give it to start it up a little bit, to start the Bunsen burners underneath it a little bit. If it's 20%, let's raise it up a little bit, maybe to 30%, maybe to 32%, and speak in general about the real quest for, I think, sincere religious conviction versus the really depressing fake bullshit you see on the internet with such slogans as Christ is King and, just like stupid people whining about masturbating and porn, and seemingly like there's an endless supply of these people who appear to exist only for the sake of making atheists complacent. And to discuss this book, I have called a friend that I've made on the internet over the last 3 years, Connor. Connor, rather than introduce you, why don't you describe describe your version of how we know each other and how you view kind of my existence in your world?
Well, we kind of met through a group chat on Twitter. We met through the based gay group chat, and back then you were a much smaller account, and it's been amazing to kind of just see you grow over the past 3 years into a much bigger account and just more open about yourself and your mission and everything. So that's been fun.
Yeah, it was. I started basically from 0 when we first met. It's true. I had like 0. I had like 10 followers or whatever when I was when Jack first added us to that to the initial Rectum group chat, which I don't even remember what it was called in that first round.
I don't either.
It's been much like France itself. The gay group chat, the base gay group chat, has been through many revolutions. Some of them bloody.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them quite bloody, and there have been a lot of dicks have been beheaded and so forth. But I guess when how do you kind of view what I'm about? I'm just curious because you're one of the few that I actually haven't met physically at this point. You're one of the last remaining like OG digital only connections.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say your mission is just all about not only freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but also just trying to get to the truth, no matter if it's painful or if it's uncomfortable or if it's unpopular, which I think is the mission of Pascal as well. It's about getting to the heart of things, regardless of if it makes you more popular or gets you more attention.
It's something I should say right now is that I first read the Penseés back in 2011, and I was reading them slowly because it's not a breezy read, but it's also not a difficult read. And you can tell me how it is in French to you because you know French, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you, but not the main reason. I mean, ultimately, that's not that important.
Hmm.
What is important is that when I started reading these, I was not a believer, and even though I ultimately wanted to be, I wanted to believe. I kind of accepted. I kind of always accepted, without knowing it, the tenets of Pascal's wager, which is ultimately that since we're not going to be able ever to gain certainty and to know what God is for certain, whether God exists, we'll never know with certainty with our limited palate. Ultimately, if we're going to try to if you're going to pick one path to pursue, it only makes sense, as he puts it very mathematically, and he is a mathematician. And the thing you have to understand about Pascal is that he really is smarter than you, like whoever you are listening to this, and certainly smarter than I am, and he's smarter than everyone. I mean, he's like, it's the highest level of mind that you're going to encounter pretty much in any field. And he's got like he's a polymath. He was not just any old physicist. Like I think he was a very innovative physicist. I think he was he was a vanguard scientist. I mean, vanguard mathematician. He was obsessed with gambling, which is another literally me moment, in the sense that metaphysically obsessed, kind of almost like Dostoevsky, except in a smarter way than Dostoevsky. He was actually entranced by the kind of probabilistic nature of reality. So he was thinking about these issues from every single angle, and like everyone else in France at the time, he was deeply writing under the influence and in reaction to Michel de Montaigne, and specifically in the skepticism exhibited by Montaigne's letter to Ramon Sibon, I think it's called, his longest piece of writing, the longest essay, which is famously a kind of here and there agnostic. I haven't actually read it, so I can't comment on it with specificity, but I will read it. It's one of like these ultimate like skeptical considerations of religious belief, which basically everyone, like everyone. I mean, Shakespeare was greatly influenced by Montaigne. The entire Western literature is the course of Western literature was altered forever by Montaigne and his invention of the personal essay, and the way he regarded every little aspect of his life in a manner that we're still kind of imitating to this day, and one would call it narcissism now, but that's just because it's been degraded to the point that a bunch of annoying people can talk about themselves with very little insight. But Pascal was writing in very much in a conversation with Montaigne, and he was inspired, I think, to do his own, his response to this is in many ways his response to that essay. And I was reading this back in 2011, and the first impression it had on me was that it instantly, like, I was like, okay, this is a person who's approaching the matter from the same place that I am.
Hmm.
For me, the essential fact that I was aware of and that I had kind of been educated in through the writers that I admired who were also wise, people like Eric Hoffer, Nietzsche, even going back to initially to Ayn Rand, actually, which was the idea that there's no trait, there's no human trait, there's no virtue that isn't kind of like loaded with vice, and there's no vice that isn't loaded with virtue, and that the best thing that humans are capable of doing can very easily become the worst thing that they're capable of doing. And this like the essentially paradoxical nature of the human condition was like the most important thing to me in my 20s, you know, as I was kind of like dealing with these topics. And it's what ultimately opened my mind from the ideological, like ardent certainties of my teens, where I knew exactly what the world needed and that, you know, the truth was the truth and with a capital T. It kind of melted that dogmatic certainty away, and it left me kind of open to a deeper sort of truth. And so when I opened up these Penseés, I saw that Pascal was really coming at it from the very same kind of like premises. How do you feel about the kind of rudimentary basic premises of Pascal and of these Penseés? You are in your early 20s, right? Your mid 20s?
Yeah.
So you're in a place very similar to where I was when I first read them. So that's one of the other reasons I had you on. So how did this land on you when you first opened it?
For me, so around the beginning of this year, I kind of went through like a major existential crisis that I'm kind of only just now fully getting over. And I was actually reading that Pascal had what he called his night of fire, which was basically when like just everything kind of broke down around him, and he realized that the only thing that he really could know was God. That like the idea of anything else was not you. You couldn't really stand on anything else, you know. That when you fully kind of come to terms with the fact that you don't know anything and that everything is kind of unknowable, and you're kind of just on rocky footing with everything. And so Pascal kind of came out of that moment of like really hardened believer in Christianity. And I sort of think that when I first started reading this book, I was kind of going through something similar. And this book kind of helped guide me through it in a lot of ways. And so I think that he's just kind of right about everything he talks about.
I'm just filling up my coffee. 1 second. It is impossible to face these questions with a dry mouth or in a dry mind. So tell me a little bit about your existential crisis.
I mean, it was sort of like, it was very instantaneous. It was sort of like one moment I was fine. And then one moment it was like in an instant, I just was kind of fully inculcated with just the reality of the world in a way. You know, it was sort of like 1 minute I was just myself. And then it was like it was almost like divine revelation. I don't really know how else to explain it. It was just sort of like, I wasn't on drugs or anything. This just happened. It was sort of like the reality of my insignificance kind of hit me. And just the reality that I didn't know really anything, that nothing that I thought I knew I could really know for certain.
And this hit you out of the blue. There was no trigger. There was no life event.
Well, it actually, I mean, it happened shortly after I lost my grandmother. I mean, it wasn't around the same time as that. Like, it didn't happen right after I found out. It happened like a while later, but my brain was sort of ruminating on things, I guess. And then something kind of just hit me out of the blue.
And was your grandmother the first person close to you that you've lost?
No, but it's been a long time. And I think maybe having to go through that as an adult and not as a child, you know, I think it really hit me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, timing is everything when it comes to
Yeah.
the first. It's not just whether it's the first. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. I mean, losing my grandmother was my also, you know, first big brush with mortality, and that happened when I was 8, 9. Well, not it was when I was 19. I just turned 19, a freshman year of college. But she got her basically. She got cancer right when I arrived at freshman year of college, and so on top of that huge change, there were like everything. My entire this has happened multiple times now in my life.
Yeah.
Where my entire the ground of reality, the pavement of reality beneath your feet has just sort of, dissolved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it usually happens. It usually hits not just in one way. It hits in several ways at the same time. Like several
exactly.
things. Usually where everything comes in threes, as they say. Like three things happen. So the lingering aftermath of losing your grandmother obviously had this kind of, there were cracks that spread through the windshield of your reality, and then boom.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And when did this happen? When did the night of fire, the Blaise, if you will?
This was around
Blaise. March, okay. So just a couple months ago.
Yeah. 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 It was not that long ago. Yeah.
Very recent.
But when you reached out to me about doing this episode, I mean, it just kind of felt like the perfect timing. I was like, this seems like exactly what I need in my life at this moment. And I really do think it sort of was in a way.
What is the first thing that hit you in the Penseés? Now, one of the interesting things is, and by the way, we're not going to be able to get through the whole thing. It's, this is a very dense, work. I mean, and there's just, they're written in, it's basically a series of aphorisms of varying length, some as brief as 2 words and some is like several pages long. And some are more complete than others. Some are just clearly notes or fragments that he meant to develop into arguments that he never got around to. Okay, so I'll read the sections as we have them here in this the Dutton paperback edition, which is introduced with great introduction by T.S. Eliot, and the translation, which is by somebody named W.F. Trotter, I have to say, is far, far more eloquent than the version that I read back 13 years ago, which is the Oxford edition, which is translated by somebody named Honor Levy, no relation to the Zoomer novelist that is going on Red Scare and stuff now. I've been very confused by the references to Honor Levy, because then on top of that, Honor Levy, there's also Bernard Henri Levy. There's just like a lot of, I don't know. So I recommend, looking at these two side by side, and I'm not a translation freak or anything, but because these are aphorisms that really depend on the punch of the words, I feel like the edition we just read is just far, far better. I mean, it's just far punchier. I don't know if it's less accurate, but I don't imagine T.S. Eliot would have lended his name and written an introduction for something that he did not approve of. So I like this way more. And the numbers we're going to refer to when dialing up some aphorisms in this discussion are coming from this edition. They are different than the numbers you will find in the Oxford edition for reasons that I don't even want to begin to think about. The first section is called Thoughts on Mind and Style. This is not about religion. This is just about the nature of the mind and of persuasion. He's really good at some of this stuff. I mean, there was one line in here, number 47. There are some who speak well and write badly, for the place and the audience warm them and draw from their minds more than they think of without that warmth. I think that's very true, I try to, in the style of this show, I try to like parade both forms of my own particular thinking, because you hear me speak, it's not in front of an audience, sometimes an actual audience, or at minimum, the audience of the one person that I'm talking to. And you hear how I think in that mode. And then you hear how I think when I'm alone and when I write these introductions by myself. And I kind of, for the sake of transparency for myself and for the audience, I like to kind of show you both frames of mind, because I think, I find it like in our present day reality where we are certain of less than ever before, it seems, and I think that goes for everybody. We are more, for all the delusions of our time, I think people are more aware of how little they know about everything than I think probably any recent time, because so many things we took for granted have just absolutely dissolved. And in large part, that's because of Donald Trump. Let's be honest. That he kind of lit the fuse on that rupture. So a lot of the things that we just assumed were kind of dependable social based realities are simply no longer there. By the way, did that have any influence on your crisis, or is that sort of besides the point?
I think a big part of it was also COVID. That was sort of like, a barrier that we never thought could have been reached. There was sort of this expectation of how your life would go. And then suddenly out of nowhere, the government decides that they're just going to completely upend all civilization and just, just completely end anyone from having a real life.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like, if you can't even take something as basic as like the structure of your life for granted, what can you take for granted? What can you believe in? What can you have faith will be there, from day to day?
That's where the pandemic becomes something very akin to, like a war, not because we were our courage was tested, although our moral courage was, in many respects. And many people, the body can't many people died if we're counting the moral courage casualties as casualties. Many more people died from that than from COVID. Mm-hmm. But in the sense that, you look through history, life and reality are a certain way, and then boom, the crash of 29 happens. Everything changes. Yep. Everything changes. And then boom, World War II happens, everything changes. And for years there is this intermission, which is a world war, which you're either fighting in, and it doesn't feel like an intermission. If you're fighting, that's the play. But if you're not fighting, it's an intermission. Every kind of reality is strangely frozen in this Twilight Zone world that isn't real exactly, but is also 10 times more real. And then boom, you have a different world after that. After the war is over, the war ends at some point. Depending on where you are, it's a much better world or it's a much worse world. Or it's a world where people are suddenly babies have 3 eyeballs and weird mutated nuclear heads and shit. And then boom, there's, whatever the next big thing is. Although it's pretty clear that America didn't have a big thing after World War II, like a single big, huge thing. Because Vietnam was close, but it only applied to the young, and it didn't kind of envelop all of society, and so it created this kind of it created a lot of different camps, but it didn't apply to everybody. And COVID did that, and it did it in a way that was so transparently unnecessary from the very beginning. After 3 weeks, after the first 6 weeks of people being certain that, okay, this isn't something that's just killing everybody. This is something that's killing a small percentage of people who are already very sick, and it's obvious that every measure should be taken to isolate those who are at risk, which we know, and we know who they are. But instead, there was just this universal one-size-fits-all imprisonment. And everyone's plans got absolutely fucked, and mine included. We have to be honest about what we've learned since then, which is that nothing is real.
Nothing is real, and you can't take anything for granted.
There's nothing that is going to last ever on this earth. Like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not an absolutely retarded pandemic that does it, it'll be some other random thing. Like seriously, it's going to be something's going to happen every time. Anybody who thinks that like history is over, any of these or any version of that cliche is simply ignoring the entirety in everything we know about the human experience at this point. And we're going to forget. Like people are going to forget. There's going to be another golden age, or there's going to be the opposite of golden age. There's going to be an extremely dark age, and a lot of people are going to assume that it's going to be like that forever. And I think even right now, a lot of people are assuming it's going to be like that forever, and that's a mistake. It's not going to be. So anyway, the pandemic clearly alters the reality for many, many people, myself included, you included. You lose your grandmother. So how else did this proceed?
I also graduated college around this time, so that also sort of added another layer of major change. So it was kind of just everything hitting all at once, as you were saying. Just major changes all happening one after the other, and just sort of realizing that you can't take anything for granted. There's nothing you can take for granted. There's nothing firm that you can really stand yourself on.
But it took you several years for this to actually crumble your foundation.
Yes.
I mean, this is 2024, and this started in 2020, and
yeah.
What do you think delayed it so much? Because you graduated in 2022?
Yeah.
Was there something about the initial aftermath of the pandemic that kind of granted a stay of execution to your reality?
I've been thinking a lot about this, where it was sort of like in 2021 and 2022, and even 2023, it was sort of like, especially right after Biden was elected, like, Democrats had kind of given up on caring about issues for a while. And there was an attempt to sort of keep us in a stable country for at least a little bit. I would say and then they got rid of all the mask mandates. They got rid of everything related to COVID. So there was like a blissful period of sort of like, oh, things are back to normal again. And I guess I think a lot of it was like the midterms sort of leading up to that. They wanted to make sure that they could win certain seats and things like that. But then since the midterm, it's basically been like the Democrats are just completely running the country into the ground with no care whatsoever. And I think just sort of having to like live through not only the aftermath of COVID, but now just things have not gone back to the way they were before. And all of the issues that were around during COVID for the most part are still there. All the just the fundamental changes in society, they're there, and it's not like there's all the good that there was in 2021 and 2022 to really balance it anymore. We're sort of just faced with the country that we're in now, fully head on, and just kind of have to grapple with the fact that we live in a completely different place than we grew up in.
In the beginning of every new reality is the words. Like that, there's no way around it. And so we try to dig ourselves out of a hole like that. We have to be very sensitive to what it is that we're digging with and what we're using for mortar. And so I think this first section is quite secretly the most important part of the entire book. Number 46, a maker of witticisms, a bad character. I like that one. A poet and not an honest man. He has all these.
Part of 34, he says, educated people draw little distinction between the trade of a poet and that of an embroiderer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It is therefore false praise to give a man when we say of him on his entry that he is a very clever poet, and it is a bad sign when a man is not asked to give his judgment on some verses. Yeah, I mean, We should not be able to say of him, this is number 35, we should not be able to say of a man he is a mathematician or a preacher or eloquent, but that he is a gentleman. That universal quality alone pleases me. It is a bad sign when, on seeing a person, you remember his book. I would prefer you to see no quality till you meet it and have occasion to use it. For fear some one quality prevail and designate the man. Let none think him a fine speaker unless oratory be in question, and then let them think it. This is deep because the current structure of communication and basically of society, which basically is like all communication right now, is very much like geared toward making you one thing and turning you into one thing and having you known to be one thing. And if you want to get any kind of recognition, you have to kind of be attached to one thing. You have to ride into the discourse on you have to like grab onto a little rocket topic, and you need to be this person or that person. Like you need to be the guy the Gamergate guy, the Me Too, the anti-Me Too, the this, the that. Like there's one thing that all kind of public discourse is designed to affiliate you with. And it turns people and dehumanizes them, and it turns them into memes. And it's one of the great devils of this particular time. And he really does tackle that in this opening section. He really does set the lie to all of that.
Yeah, there's another part of it later on in the book. I'm trying to find it. It's 323. And so he talks about, the self. He says that if someone loves me for my judgment or my memory, he doesn't love me for who I am. He only loves me for those traits. And so he's basically saying that we almost never love people for themselves. We love them for their qualities. Even if you start getting more abstract with it, deep down, you're fundamentally loving someone for their quality. You're loving someone because they're beautiful, because they have a good personality, something like that. And so he says, we shouldn't be acting like and then he's kind of talking about the mitwits. So he says that you shouldn't get upset when people honor someone because of their rank or their status, because we all just love people because of their qualities anyway. And he's basically pointing out that those are no more sound qualities than anything else.
One of the all-important insights in the book as well. And it's all a matter of carving away. What he's doing is he's carving away at, like, what is there beneath it all? Like,
yeah,
that's where it's like, no, you think that you're deep because you love someone because of their humor or their intelligence or their this, but no, you're just loving qualities again. You're not loving a soul. The soul is something beyond those qualities, because somebody can get dumb. Will you love me when I'm a retard? That's the ultimate test, And even then, being a retard is a quality. Will you love me when I lose my retardation? The soul is something that is very hard to ascertain, except we do have a sense of somebody's soul if we're kind of in tune with we have an unspoken affection or disaffection for people. Quite apart from the traits that we would cite when we are pressed to say why we like them or don't like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's I'm sure Pascal's entire point with that is that it's like there's something deeper beneath the surface than what we tell ourselves is true. And Pascal is just such a brilliant person where it sort of is like he looks at basic human interaction and sort of can find God hiding in there. And so he sort of is looking at how we treat other people and how we can say that we like someone for these traits or, because of their status or something like that. But we can also just love someone on a fundamental level. We can appreciate someone because of their soul. And so Pascal's point with so much of this is like, why would we do that? If there wasn't a God, why would we have a fundamental understanding of other people just for being human?
at the heart of all these things, which he's trying to get at, is, when you remove all these things, what is left?
Mm-hmm.
The qualities that one loves somebody for, like as he will prove later on, all of those qualities are probably present in their, like the opposite of those qualities are also present in that person. And in certain moments at certain times, you don't necessarily see it because unless you examine yourself and you become good at examining yourself. If you become good at examining yourself, you will notice that every single one of your best qualities doesn't exist in you alone from its like evil counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
What can like the connective tissue between the best moments and the worst moments, I think, was for me anyway, the kind of like that was sort of the question mark that ultimately opened my mind to a divine answer, because I didn't see any other answer that could possibly exist. I didn't see any other. I didn't see any other way. Like I didn't see any other explanation for the paradox that we could be so evil and we could be so great at the same time. His ultimate argument for Christianity specifically, which is that it is what we often do to avoid dealing with these mysteries, is that we hide in either despair or pride, meaning that we either assume that assume that like the evil is the rule, that life is all life is evil and everyone's evil and everything sucks, the Gen X view. and we either do that and escape into that particular lie, or we more healthily usually do the opposite, which is that we and this is something that obviously, if you're purely a dogmatic Randian, you might be subject to this particular mistake, which is that you take all the good stuff as proof that man is that one is like naturally just great, and it's all just march toward greatness, and that leads to pride, and that's false as well, because we know that no matter what, even if we keep it up, even if we keep up the act for an entire lifetime, and even if we're great and and it's a march of progress for our entire lives, we're still going to die. Like there's still this inexplicable, pathetic finale. and so no matter what, like, it all kind of, there's no way around it. There's no way around the kind of that something is wrong, and I think this is like a really important, because what you see over and over and over again is people falling into one trap or another. What was like the straw on the camel's back, disillusion wise, that led to this crisis?
I think, just like, I think a lot of it was just seeing just the slow just death of culture in America, and just the idea of the country that I was born into just no longer really existing. And it was sort of like, just in the time that I grew up in was just there was just such a big sense of the world constantly getting better. And you could just experience that within your own lifetime. You could think about things. The way I like to think of it is like nostalgia, and how big nostalgia is now. Like people back in the day, they didn't have that same sense of nostalgia. There was always this sense of things growing and getting better and improving. And, there might be parts where it kind of went down, but there was always a sense of things going back up eventually. And I guess just seeing so much of that just completely fall apart, over the course of COVID and over the course of just the past 4 years, I think eventually it was like the part of my brain that like could conceive of it going back kind of fell apart. And it was sort of like I realized that I had no idea where things were going.
And 3 months later, I'm assuming you haven't exactly figured out the answer, have you?
I have not figured out the answer, but I do think I think reading Pascal's ideas on this are really helpful because it was sort of like, how do I put it? He sort of showed that the way that I was thinking, the idea of constant progress, it showed that there was something divine in that idea. There's something divine in the human desire to constantly improve. But the fact that we're always at some point going to crash shows that we're not perfect either. And so Pascal's whole point with this is that it's only Christianity that can really reconcile these two differences. That all of the other ways of thinking that he discusses, it's sort of is like there's either that implication that things will always improve, or the implication that we're just meaningless, that we have no purpose, and that we're just completely negative beings from the get-go. And I just found his arguments really convincing that, you know, you can't really reconcile these two things in any other way other than the idea of Christianity, where you have, you know, the rise and the fall, and then, you know, the rise again, you know.
What was the status of your belief before reading this and before March?
I was just before March. I mean, I've always been an optimistic person. I still would say that I am, but it was sort of like I was kind of blissfully ignorant in my optimism. And even through COVID, I would say that I was very optimistic. And I guess, I don't know, something just sort of clicked that, you know, maybe this time's different. And, you know, just the reason finally took over, you know. And that doesn't necessarily mean it was correct, but just like recognizing that my own belief in optimism wouldn't change the reality of the world, you know.
That's a harsh one.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that like being optimistic and having a like there's a lot of truth in the hullabaloo about manifesting and being optimistic and kind of create like having a positive energy create a positive reality. There's a lot of truth in that. Like there's a lot of practical.
I do agree.
Yeah. I mean, I know like severe sort of rigid Christian thinkers reject that unless they're like Norman Vincent Peale types, in which that is their whole thing. The power of positive thinking and all this. But like traditional Catholic, old-time Christian thinkers will pretty much summarily reject all of that. And I don't think that's correct, because I think that you can definitely, you know, it's again, it's like we're stumbling over words here. A word like reality is very, very fraught. I mean, there's just so many different senses in which reality can mean something, you know? Mm-hmm. Your attitude is its own reality. Your mood is its own reality. So if your mood is good because you're an optimist and because you're, you know, focusing on good things, thinking about good things, you have the discipline to keep a good frame, a good like selection of thought, you know, decorate your brain with good thoughts and productive thoughts. If you have that discipline, you're going to be optimistic. If you have that optimism, you're going to have more energy. If you have more energy, you're going to like good things are going to happen. It's just that's the way. This is all about living a better life, and it's all about, these are all habits. In a way, they're customs. In a way, optimism is a custom. And there's one of the first things here that I highlighted, which is not, you know, like it shows you the importance of custom. I mean, we kind of like, I think we live in a time where custom is scoffed at, because we're like, well, why do you need to do the rituals to, you know, believe in God? Well, you don't. It's just a matter of like, it's sort of a safety net to do those rituals. It's like, some people need the rituals 100%. Some people can't get out of bed if they don't have the rituals. You know what I mean? Some people need their customs to be like down to the fucking minute, and other people, they need a different set of customs. They need a different style of customs. There's one here where he goes, the hell was it? Parents fear lest the natural love of their children may fade away. What kind of nature is that which is subject to decay? Custom is a second nature which destroys the former. But what is nature? For is custom not natural? I am much afraid that nature is itself only a first custom, as custom is a second nature. So, and this is the section where the misery of man without God section. So this is like the dark part. It's optimism is a custom, and there is some, custom is limited, and it's as limited as nature is. So it's like, it's real, it's important, but it's not enough. It's not everything.
Yeah.
So you found your optimism quite shattered, I guess.
Yeah, it was interesting that you mentioned Norman Vincent Peale, because I was actually really into him last year, and I found it extremely helpful. And I still think that there is a lot of truth just to the idea of staying positive no matter what. But it was sort of like, I don't know, it was sort of like the idea was sort of brought to its breaking point. I think there is still something to it. I think it sort of is like when everything is lost, and there's, it sort of is like the beginning of the Bible, where it's out of chaos comes the light, It sort of is like you have to be that within the world itself. You have to be that light from the chaos.
The nature of self-love and of this human ego is to love self only and consider self only. But what will man do? He cannot prevent this object that he loves from being full of faults and wants. He wants to be great, and he sees himself small. He wants to be happy, and he sees himself miserable. He wants to be perfect, and he sees himself full of imperfections. He wants to be the object of love and esteem among men, and he sees that his faults merit only their hatred and contempt. This embarrassment in which he finds himself produces in him the most unrighteous and criminal passion that can be imagined, for he conceives a moral enmity against the truth, which reproves him and which convinces him of his faults. He would annihilate it, but, unable to destroy it in its essence, he destroys it as far as possible in his own knowledge and in that of others. That is to say, he devotes all his attention to hiding his faults, both from others and from himself, and he cannot endure either that others should point them out to him or that they should see them. Truly, it is an evil to be full of faults, but it is a still greater evil to be full of them and to be unwilling to recognize them, since that is to add the further fault of a voluntary illusion. We do not like others to deceive us. We do not think it is fair that they should be held in higher esteem by us than they deserve. It is not then fair that we should deceive them and should wish them to esteem us more highly than we deserve. Thus, when they discover only the imperfections and vices which we really have, it is plain they do us no wrong, since it is not they who cause them. They rather do us good, since they help us to free ourselves from an evil, namely the ignorance of these imperfections. We ought not to be angry at their knowing our faults and despising us. It is but right that they should know us for what we are and should despise us if we are contemptible. Such are the feelings that would arise in a heart full of equity and justice. What must we say then of our own heart when we see in it a wholly different disposition? I'm going to continue reading this very long number 100 because it's so apt. For is it not true that we hate truth and those who tell it us, and that we like them to be deceived in our favor, and prefer to be esteemed by them as being other than what we are in fact? One proof of this makes me shudder. The Catholic religion does not bind us to confess our sins indiscriminately to everybody. It allows them to remain hidden from all other men save one, to whom she bids us reveal the innermost recesses of our heart and show ourselves as we are. There is only this one man in the world whom she orders us to undeceive, and she binds him to an inviolable secrecy, which makes this knowledge to him as if it were not. Can we imagine anything more charitable and pleasant? And yet, the corruption of man is such that he finds even this law harsh, and it is one of the main reasons which he has caused a great part of Europe to rebel against the church. How unjust and unreasonable is the heart of man which feels it disagreeable to be obliged to do in regard to one man what in some measure it were right to do to all men. For is it right that we should deceive men? There are different degrees in this aversion to truth, but all may perhaps be said to have it in some degree, because it is inseparable from self-love. It is this false delicacy which makes those who are under the necessity of reproving others choose to so many windings and middle courses to avoid offense. They must lessen our faults, appear to excuse them, intersperse praises and evidence of love and esteem. Despite all this, the medicine does not cease to be bitter to self-love. It takes as little as it can, always with disgust, and often with a secret spite against those who administer it. Hence it happens that if any have some interest in being loved by us, they are averse to render us a service, which they know to be disagreeable. They treat us as we wish to be treated. We hate the truth, and they hide it from us. We desire flattery, and they flatter us. We like to be deceived, and they deceive us. So each degree of good fortune which raises us in the world removes us farther from the truth, because we are most afraid of wounding those whose affection is most useful and whose dislike is most dangerous. A prince may be the byword of all Europe, and he alone will know nothing of it. I am not astonished. To tell the truth is useful to those to whom it is spoken, but disadvantageous to those who tell it, because it makes them disliked. Now those who live with princes love their own interests more than that of the prince whom they serve, and so they take care not to confer on him a benefit so as to injure themselves. This evil is no doubt greater and more common among the higher classes, but the lower are not exempt from it, since there is always some advantage in making men love us. Human life is thus only a perpetual illusion. Men deceive and flatter each other. No one speaks of us in our presence as he does of us in our absence. Human society is founded on mutual deceit. Few friendships would endure if each knew that his friend said of him in his absence, if each knew what his friend said of him in his absence, although he then spoke in sincerity and without passion. Man is then only disguise, falsehood, and hypocrisy, both in himself and in regard to others. He does not wish anyone to tell him the truth. He avoids telling it to others, and all these dispositions, so removed from justice and reason, have a natural root in his heart. Mic drop.
Yeah.
And there, yeah. So, does that check out? Thank you for listening to the free part of the show. Now for the full 3-hour version, which I do believe arrives at some destination, however long and winding this particular Pascalian road. Subscribe to the show at patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Put a little bit of money where your soul is if you want to see this thing continue. And you will get more than twice as many feature-length adventures and regular smoke break mini-eps on topics and media of the day. It's worth it. Just do it. Patreon.com/filthyarmenian. But either way, thank you for listening, and see you on the other side of the paywall.